Hello everyone, hope you're doing well and you're having a good day. I am delighted to be welcomed on to the Fit&Well Instagram account to talk to you guys today about all of those bugs that live in our gut, collectively known as the gut microbiome, and probiotics. Just a little bit of background on myself. So my name is Eve Kalinik. I'm a nutritional therapist and a functional medical practitioner. I'm also an author, written 2 books on the subject of gut health. The last one, Happy Gut, Happy Mind, came out last year. So I'm clearly very passionate about gut health and always wanting to talk about it. And I know that you've had a few lives on here talking about gut health. So I'm going to try and maybe slightly change this a bit to focus in more on that gut microbiome and about probiotics, because I know a lot of you guys have probably got a lot of questions about probiotics. But before we kick off at talking about probiotics, I think it's really important to get a bit more understanding around the gut microbiome. So, bit of a weird stat here, but we are literally as much microbial as we are human cells. So what was once thought of as a 10-to-1 ratio is actually now more of a 1-to-1 ratio of microbes versus human cells, but still it's quite mental to think that we are at least as much microbe as we are human. And there are trillions of microbes that live in and on us. We've got different microbiomes all over the body. So we've got microbiome on our skin, we've got ones in the vagina, and also we've got our gut microbiome, and our gut microbiome is by far the largest. So again, like we're talking about some trillions of microbes that compose of things like bacteria and fungi and other such things that live in our gut. And what was always kind of thought of just these microbes that are just living in our gut actually is now being seen as an organ in its own right, due to the amount of processes and systems that our microbiome manages and takes care of us for. So when we talk about the microbes in our gut, I think there is a tendency to kind of either go with those good bad bugs or bad bugs, and actually quite a lot of the time it's not categorically good versus bad. We have some that are called commensal and they just sort of hang out there, and basically it's more of a kind of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours relationship with our gut microbiome, in that we give them food in terms of fibre and they give back to us in way of producing lots of positive substances, which we'll come on to talk about. But your gut microbiome is completely unique and a bit like a fingerprint. So what kind of constitutes somebody feeling well in their gut versus somebody else can be completely different depending on the composition of their microbiomes. But when we do get that imbalance, like I said, so we get more of the less friendly bugs and not as many as the good bugs in our gut, we call that dysbiosis. So with dysbiosis, you can often see some direct gut symptoms, which could be the obvious digestive ones. But why we need to look after our microbiome? So it might be digestion is an obvious one, and that's because the microbes in our gut help us to break down our food, absorb nutrients from our food, managing things like appetite hormones and such like, and motility through the gut. So digestion is one part of how our gut helps our body, but there are many more far-reaching processes and systems that our gut microbiome has a significant influence over. So one would be our immune system. So again, not many of us are quite aware that 60 or even 70-80% of our immune system is located and managed in our gut, and that fundamentally relies on the health of the microbiome. The other sort of major area that's getting a lot of attention and traction is the gut-brain axis. And so whilst we always thought of the gut and the brain communicating as more of a top-down type of thing, so we feel anxious in our mind and then we feel the butterflies in our tummy, it's actually much more of a bi-directional relationship. And our microbes use things like the same neurotransmitters that we use in our brain to communicate back up to the brain. In fact, things like serotonin, which many of you might have heard of, which is dubbed our happy hormone, most of that's actually produced in our gut. So there is definitely that sort of bi-directional relationship. The microbiome also helps us to manage inflammation, not just in our gut, but in our body more generally. And it does that by producing other positive substances, so things like short chain fatty acids. I know that's quite a long acronym, but those help to manage inflammation in our gut and also in our body more generally. The microbiomes have also been associated with things like our weight, for instance, as well. So there's loads of other areas. It's not just about digestion alone. So what happens in the gut doesn't just stay in the gut. And there are a few factors that can contribute to our gut negatively or impact on our gut negatively. So that could be, for a start, things like the environment in which we bathe that microbiome. So we are born with a microbiome, so we inherit that from our mum. And again, that can be a bit potluck, and depending on what the microbiome your mum's passed on to, you can have a stronger or not so strong one. But then it's really about those first few years as we're growing up, the environment we're exposed to, the foods we're eating. So if we don't have enough dietary fibre, things like even where we're living. So studies looking at kids that grow up in the countryside versus those that grow up in the city. Those in the countryside tend to have more of a diverse microbiome. So those are a couple of factors that can impact on how our microbiome develops and grows. And then things like medications, so the obvious one being antibiotics. And I think, everybody's well aware of the fact that we overuse antibiotics, but what that has actually done is destroy a lot of the microbes in our gut, and even to the point that we've destroyed microbes that we never even knew we had due to just that prolific use of antibiotics. And I'm not a woo-woo therapist, and they are life-saving, but it's more kind of the chronic use of those antibiotics. But other medications, things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like your ibuprofen, for instance, and other things like the oral contraceptive pill, those can all impact on our microbiome. Another big one is stress. So we know that the hormones that we produce when we're stressed, like cortisol, impacts not just on the function of the gut barrier and that gut-brain connection, but also on the composition of the microbiome. So some of those things we have more or less control over, and there are definitely some things that we can improve on, me included. But those are some of the things that can impact on your microbiome. So I did mention fibre because fibre is kind of like king for our gut microbiome, and fibre is a type of carbohydrate that we don't have the capacity to digest. Our human digestive system can't break it down and absorb, but what it does do is provide crucial food and fuel for our microbes. So we ingest fibre through our diet, and that helps to feed all the microbes in our gut. And a lot of my clients go, oh yeah, I know what fibre is, but actually we're not quite sure. So for those of you who are kind of still thinking you're not really sure what fibre is, you can find that in all plant-based foods. So we're talking about whole grains, nuts and seeds, vegetables, fruit. And the key thing is really to get as much diversity in those sources of fibre. So we are all creatures of habit, and we do just click on the same supermarket shop. I'm guilty of that as well. But the more diversity we can get in our fibre sources, the better, because as we currently understand, the more diverse our microbiome, the healthier and the stronger it is. So some easy hacks, because we're all busy people, might be things like having a nuts and seed mix. So you put in about 6 or 7 different types of nuts and seeds that you can sprinkle over your breakfast or soups or salads or something like that. I'm a big fan of getting frozen veg or fruit because, again, a lot of this stuff is about convenience. You can just have those there. Batch cooking is also really good. So again, you can just make a lot, and then it's easier to just mix and match through your meals, so you're not having to keep preparing meals. So those are kind of some nice sort of easy tips to get diversity in our fibre sources. And I guess the next step on from that is something called, or a section of fibre, which is called prebiotics. So a lot of people get confused between pre and probiotics. So part of me coming on here today is to kind of differentiate between the two. So prebiotics are essentially a type of fibre. They have a more potent feeding effect on our gut microbiome. And you might find these in things like foods like garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, whole wheat. So those are some of the more common prebiotics. They're in lots and lots of different foods. And essentially, like I say, they have a bit more of a potent feeding effect on the microbiome. You can get them in supplements as well, but it's just as easy in a way to get them through your diet. Some clients find that when they overdo it on prebiotics, whether it's food or supplements, that might increase their digestive symptoms, because again, you're really feeding that microbiome. And the side effect of that might be a lot of fermentation going on in the gut. Fermentation can result in more gas and bloating, but they are really important to help, like I said, nourish and feed our microbiome. Probiotics are very different. So prebiotics we're using, that's basically the food and the fuel, so it's kind of feeding our microbiome, whereas probiotics are more like delivering the beneficial microbes into our gut. So we can take them through a supplement, or we can take them through foods. Normally when we're talking about probiotics, it is in a supplement form, but fermented foods would be your probiotic food sources. So that would be things like natural live yogurt, traditional cheeses, kimchi, kefir, sauerkraut. Those are all really like great sources of food probiotics. The difference between a supplement and a food is that the supplements are generally made in a lab setting, so they're kind of created under more scientific rigor, or one would hope anyway, and that's an important point to come on to. But yeah, they're more in that kind of they're more in a concentrated form than necessarily a food form. Although, having said that, in a piece of cheese you are taking in some trillions of microbes. So for me, it's always about getting, again, with your fibre sources, getting those foods in and getting diversity in those fermented foods, as well as potentially looking at a supplement. So let's dive a little bit more into that, because again, it's a question I get asked a lot about, is probiotic supplements, are they worth it? Should you take them? Why should you take them? So probiotic supplements will normally centre around a couple of genus, which is a posh name for families. And that would be your lactobacilli and your bifidobacterium. So often when you look at the back of a label on a probiotic supplement or a package, it will usually have some of those. And then underneath that, you'll see different species and different strains. Some of the strains will have like a number and a letter associated to them. So that's just denoting that specific subspecies. But generally, a lot of the probiotic supplements do focus on those two families, because they're the ones we just know a lot more about. I mean, we still got a lot more to learn about gut health, but we do know that those two families are definitely ones that we want in our gut. Sometimes you might see some things like Saccharomyces boulardii in probiotic supplements, which is a type of yeast which has probiotic effects as well. But those are the more common, like I said, species and strains that you might see. Why you might want to take them is another big topic. So I guess most often than not, people do take them for digestive health. And there is a lot of research and studies now about how probiotics can help with things like the symptoms that you might experience with things like IBS. So that would be constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas, that type of thing. It is really, really important though, before you do go and just take a probiotic for that reason, if you do see that you're having changes in your bowel movements, especially if you're seeing anything like excessive mucus or mucus in the stools, blood in the stools, pain, it should always go to your GP first and get a diagnosis, and then perhaps think about looking into probiotics thereafter, because there are a lot of studies, I say, that have been associated with helping to relieve those symptoms, but it is important to get your diagnosis first. So I just wanted to say that. Another area of probiotics that is a subsection of probiotics is psychobiotics, and that is basically looking at supporting that gut-brain axis. So again, as we get more understanding around the gut microbiome, there is the potential that we can use probiotic supplements to enhance the production of certain neurotransmitters, and that can have a positive effect, or work in conjunction with other therapies and potentially drugs with conditions like mood disorders, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But again, it's not just, you don't just take probiotic, it's within a context of having a well-rounded approach to that specific condition. But it is very, very exciting, the area of psychobiotics, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more research and knowledge coming out around that. You might also take probiotics for your immune health. Again, because there's that 70-80% of our immune system is located in our gut, and if we don't have a healthy and strong microbiome, it can impact on our immune system. And again, more studies coming out and around that too, which is very exciting. And other kind of things might be things like skin health. There is some positive correlations with probiotic supplementation and things like rosacea and eczema and things like that. So it's a huge area, and like I said, because the gut takes out or covers more than just digestion alone, there are lots of other areas of our health and well-being that probiotics can certainly have a really kind of significant role in. So somebody's just asked, what should we look for when we're identifying a probiotic to take, which is a really, really great question, because it's not a one size fits all with probiotics. As I said right at the start of this, our microbiomes are completely unique. They're like a fingerprint. So just because your mate says, oh, I love that probiotic, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you. And I genuinely believe that as we get more understanding around probiotics and the gut microbiome, we'll probably get to the point that we have prescriptive probiotics. But there's certainly definitely some way in which you're being much more targeted in the probiotics that we're taking for specific things. But there are some key things that you want to look out for when you're buying a probiotic. So the first one would be, make sure it's got enough CFUs, so which means colony forming units. You want to be having at least 1 billion, if not more, in the probiotic supplement you're taking. And the reason for that is that digestion is a very arduous process. When we ingest something, acids are thrown at it, there's churning, there's digestive enzymes. So of course we're going to lose a lot of these guys along the way. So you do need to have a healthy number to start with so that we can mitigate that kind of loss, because where we really want them to settle and get to is the large intestine. Which brings me on to my next point, which is really about the delivery system. So when you're buying a probiotic, really look at how that probiotic is, or how the formulation is suited to the delivery system that it's promising. So what I mean by that is that certain probiotics you'll need to take on a fasted state, certain probiotics you'll need to take with food. Some will have things like enteric coating around them in the capsule format, so it survives the stomach acid. So different probiotic strains will need slightly different things. So make sure that you do check that, and you also take the probiotic in the way that's designed to be taken. The other really, really important thing is to make sure that that probiotic company will clearly display clinical data, and by that I mean independent clinical trials to back up the claims and the probiotic strains that they're using. If they don't have that, then definitely just walk away and carry on doing your research. But it's really important to make sure that there is sufficient amounts of clinical evidence behind the probiotics you're taking. I would also say that it is about consistency. So don't expect to take a probiotic and the next day feel like you've got a gut that's on fire. It's really not going to be that quick. Most microbiologists and people in the gut health science area suggest something like 2 to 3 months of taking a probiotic consistently to see if you have if it really works for you. So you do need to give it a little bit of time. And also, there's no point taking a probiotic if you are not eating enough fibre, if you're stressed out of your head, if you're not managing your sleep. The link between gut health and our sleep, again, is really bi-directional. So you need to make sure you're doing all of those other things, because otherwise it's not really fair to probiotic, and probiotics are definitely not like a gut health panacea. But I hope that you've understood now that in the whole toolkit or armour of looking after your gut, that probiotics can have a really positive and significant role. So I hope that's given you a bit more insight into the gut microbiome and probiotics. I know that linked to this live, there is a special code that you guys can use for Sharla. Sharla have also got a kind of a 3 series of probiotics which do focus in on specific areas. So like I said, as our research is developing more around gut health, it's really exciting to see how we can be more focused in our probiotics. But I hope that you guys have enjoyed that, and yeah, please do leave your comments, and yeah, I hope to see you all very soon. Oh gosh, one more question. Would you say that everybody should take one, or just if you have a problem? Well, I think again, you've got to make a decision about, there's a few things that we could look at into that. Sometimes there is a cost perspective, and I completely understand that people, you know, life is expensive and you might not necessarily have the financial means to be taking a probiotic constantly. However, the amount that our gut is on onslaught on a daily basis, even if we're doing all the right things, you know, it's quite tricky to like meet all those things as well. So it is kind of, you could think a bit about it like an insurance policy for your gut. So you don't necessarily have to be having direct digestive symptoms to take a probiotic. I hope that answers that one. But anyways, definitely make sure you're getting enough fibre, have your fermented foods in, and then if you can get a probiotic in there, fantastic. Anyway, guys, hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you all very soon. Take care. Bye.